Catch him! Catch him, Derry! Derry, catch him! Oh! Oh! He's on me! Oh! Get him! No, he's there. He's making a mockery out of you, boy. The dog's pissing! Dad, the dog's after peeing!
Hello guys and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm here to do another tag video. It's been a while since I've done one, and I saw one the other day on YouTube that I thought, yes, I like this one, I need to do this one. And as usual, of course I did not wait to be tagged, but the individuals that have done it so far has said that it's open to anyone to do. So the original tag was created by Horror in Todge. I will put that link down in the description. And also I watched a video submitted by Horror Hands channel last night, and I thoroughly enjoyed both videos. So this is a 100 years of horror tag, and it's difficult, folks. Are you ready for it? You must give your favourite horror movie from each decade, going from the 1920s to the 2020s. Now obviously some of those decades will be easier than others, as we maybe haven't seen that many from certain decades. But when you get to like the 70s and the 80s, especially for me, even the 90s, is a bit of a difficult one. Obviously there are going to be honourable mentions in some categories, which I will just whiz through, but this is my 100 years of horror tag. Okay, let's get kicked off with the 1920s. I will occasionally look down, folks. I've got my answers here because my memory is not that good. In the 1920s, for me, there can only be one, and that is the 1922 Nosferatu. This, to me, is the creepiest vampire movie that has ever existed. This, to me, is the idea and the appearance of the scary vampire rather than the attractive, I suppose, romantic vampire that we had many years later. This kind of style of vampire was also put across in 30 Days of Night, you know, the really scary vampire. Also, we have one in What We Do in the Shadows, the bald one with the fangs. Nosferatu, really creepy. This is a silent movie, there's no talking in it. Do not be fooled by that, do not be put off, do not think it's boring. It is a creepy-arsed movie with just some of the scenes in it. There's a very famous one that everyone will know, where he's rising up completely, like horizontally like this from the coffin. I'm sure I've got it somewhere. So it's this one. I should be really organised like Horror Hands, is it Bryn? And he actually had a copy of every one of his choices. I don't, because I don't have all my choices, but I do have that one. So on to the 30s. Now there were two big contenders here, and I struggled to pick between them. One is Frankenstein and the other is the original King Kong. Frankenstein is from 1931 and King Kong from 1933. I have very clear memories of watching both of these as a child. No, I was not alive in the 30s. My son asks me this, were you alive then? No, I was not alive then. But I love them both. There's a very similar feel about them in that you feel really sorry for the monster, if you want to call it that, involved in the movie. That always gets to me. It's always a gut punch to me, what happens to both monsters in those movies. So if you forced me to choose, I would probably go down the Frankenstein route, but King Kong is also an incredible movie from the 30s. And on to the 40s, guys. This was a difficult decade for me because I don't think I've seen that many movies from the 40s. One I have seen, which I really enjoyed the story behind and I always have enjoyed, is The Picture of Dorian Gray. This was 1945. And fun fact, Angela Lansbury's actually in this movie, her of Murder, She Wrote fame. Loved the idea and story of the portrait in the attic and the person not aging. It appeals to me. I don't know, I could do with one of them portraits. But yeah, 1940s, Picture of Dorian Gray. On to the 50s, guys, and you may be seeing a bit of a habit here. We're going to choose another Frankenstein movie for the 50s, and I'm going with The Curse of Frankenstein, with a horror duo that just unlike any other, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. They just are fabulous in early horror movies. I love the whole Frankenstein's monster story. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to pick another Frankenstein here, folks. Again, it's a decade where I haven't seen a load of movies from that particular decade, but I have seen that one and I do love it. Okay, the 60s, and there were three notable ones in this decade for me. We have The Mask of the Red Death and The Pit and the Pendulum, which both star Vincent Price, who is very difficult to beat in a horror movie. But what just tipped over from those two for me was Rosemary's Baby. Now, this is one of the first real classic known horror movies that most horror fans have seen. I think it was 1968, so let me check. Yes, 1968. So Rosemary's Baby is my choice for horror movie from the 60s. Okay, folks, one of the most difficult decades for me, the 70s. I will be looking down the 70s and 80s, because I've written far too many down here. If you know me at all well, you will probably know what I ended up lumping with. And if Jordan from Movie Worm ever does this tag, I think he will lump for the same one as me. So the notable mentions I have from the 70s are Carrie, I adore Stephen King, Dawn of the Dead, The Wicker Man, obviously the original, will not talk about the Nicolas Cage version. Jaws, which a lot of people don't consider a horror movie, but most definitely is, and it's stuck with me since childhood. Obviously Halloween and Alien, the start of two awesome franchises. But I had to come down to me, which is one of the creepiest, scariest horror movies ever invented, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I didn't actually see this until I was an adult. I think there's something to be said of seeing this on a really bad quality VHS, which is how I saw it for the first time. It added somehow to the actual movie, and I could not pull myself away from it. I was transfixed, disgusted, freaked out, completely, like, I didn't know how I felt about this movie. I'd like the dinner scene. I just, you know that feeling where you're just so totally repulsed and creeped out, but you can't stop looking at it? That's Texas Chainsaw Massacre for me. And very few movies creep me out to that degree. Probably none, to be fair. So for the 70s, with a lot of awesome choice in there, I'm going with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, and we're on to the 80s, and probably the most difficult decade to pick from, because this is the decade that I started going to the video store with my dad as a young child, and my dad was nuts about Stephen King. He rented every horror going, all the Stephen King horrors, even the bad ones. I mean, I've seen Graveyard Shift, the Mangler, you name it. Just, was the Mangler Stephen King? I can't remember, but it was bloody awful. A fridge eating people. Anyway, I digress. So I've written down a ton here. I'm just going to read through the ones that I've mentioned. I have circled 3 that I really struggled to choose between. I did end up picking between the 3. So what I've written down is movies from the 80s that really stand out to me. Pet Sematary, The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer, I think is a really eerie, really fantastic movie. Hellraiser, the original, loved that. Evil Dead, The Fly, I don't like the original Fly, but the remake with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, I adore. Aliens, which I prefer to Alien, which is maybe not a popular choice, but the 3 that I really, really struggled to choose between was The Shining, Poltergeist, because it's the movie that frightened me most as a child, because ghosts have always been the thing, the paranormal has always been the thing that most frightens me. Blood and guts and gore never really gets to me that much, but anything supernatural that's done well really freaks me out. So Poltergeist is in there for that reason, and of course An American Werewolf in London. Now, when I was really made sit down and think about this, I'm going to go with An American Werewolf in London. It's still the best werewolf movie that's ever been made. It still has the best werewolf transformation scene that I've ever seen. To get across the actual pain of transformation, there's a juxtaposition between the music and the scene. It just doesn't seem to go together, which makes it even more just creepy. The little Mickey Mouse in the background, just lots of different things go together to make that movie funny, scary. You really feel for David as well. You really feel for the character and this affliction, and it properly puts across the affliction of him becoming a werewolf, which a lot of other movies don't do very well or don't concentrate on at all. So American Werewolf in London is my choice for the 80s. Okay, and we're on to the 90s. And a lot of people in the horror community, this is probably where they first started watching horror. I'm aware I'm sort of on the older age with some other YouTubers in the horror community, where I'm sort of like, the 80s was probably the genre for me where I first started watching. A lot of horror fans obviously go back and watch those movies, but I'm old enough to have been watching those movies when they came out in the 80s, I horribly have to say. So the 90s, I've written a couple. Dusk Till Dawn, Quentin Tarantino. It is a horror movie. It's such a fun movie. I saw it for the first time with no knowledge whatsoever of what I was watching. I've always been a Quentin Tarantino fan. I did expect sort of his usual gritty, violent sort of movie. I did not know we were going to have that edge of having that horror element in, so it was a complete surprise to me. And I love it. Of course, it's not the best horror movie from the 90s, but I had to mention it. Also, Stir of Echoes, I wanted to mention with Kevin Bacon, because everyone talks about The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, and I prefer Stir of Echoes with Kevin Bacon. It's a similar type of movie, not exactly the same, of course, it doesn't have the same premise, but it's got that sort of paranormal, supernatural thing about it. There isn't a massive twist like we have with The Sixth Sense, but Stir of Echoes, to me, I adore Kevin Bacon when he gets a serious acting role. And can I just say here, and it's nothing to do with horror, if you have not seen the movie Murder in the First with Kevin Bacon, do yourself a favour and watch it. It's one of my favourite movies. I adore it. I adore him in it. It makes me cry buckets. It makes me angry. I write a lot. Sorry, I used to write a lot. I haven't so much lately. And watching that movie just really sparked something in me to write loads, because there's particular parts of it where it just really made me think about how you would be in the same position. But yeah, I'm deviating, I'm waffling, I do that. So anyway, for the 90s, the two that I narrowed it down to were Silence of the Lambs, one of my favourite movies, my favourite actress, and my favourite actor of all time. We've got Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. Jodie Foster and Kathy Bates tend to sort of like duel for my favourite actress, which will maybe tell you what my other choice from the 90s is. It is Misery. This is a movie, for some reason, for me personally, I know it's not high on everyone's sort of list, but people that do like this movie love this movie, and I am in that love camp. I think Joe from Geeky Hijinks channel is a big fan of Misery as well. I can watch this over and over and over again, and that's not a movie, that's not something I do. I don't watch things repeatedly. I had to sort of stop myself watching it because my husband got sick of the sight of it, and I just love it. If I had to choose between Misery and Silence of the Lambs, I will concede that Silence of the Lambs is probably a better film. For me personally, I'm going to pick Misery because of the two. I've watched it many, many more times. So Misery is my choice for the 90s. Okay, the 2000s. Now, this was a difficult one as well. Oh my goodness, right, I'm going to read through the ones I've got listed. I won't talk about them because there's too many. So Itchy the Killer, Dog Soldiers, another fantastic werewolf movie. Eden Lek, completely brutal, really disturbing movie. The Wreck movie started in the 2000s. The first one is fabulous, the Spanish sort of like found footage zombie movie. Ginger Snaps, another really sort of like basic werewolf movie, sort of stripping everything back. Really like that one. Devil's Backbone, Guillermo del Toro is a director I absolutely adore. Also in that same decade, I think, yeah, Pan's Labyrinth we had as well. There's just something really magical and like a dark fairy tale-esque that he puts across, and he's got that supernatural element running through some of his movies too. What else have we got? What's SOTD? SOTD, what have I written? Something of the something. What the hell? SOTD 2004. Right, I've completely forgotten what that stands for. Something of the Dead? No idea. The Host, Bong Joon-ho. I love this. This was a complete surprise to me. He is the director responsible for Parasite. I watched a video recently talking about Bong Joon-ho's movies and having them ranked, and it's awful. I cannot remember the name of the channel, but I am going to link it in the description. I really enjoyed the video. The YouTuber talking it's the first one of his videos I've actually seen. He's really informative about the subject, and he ranks Bong Joon-ho's videos, and I want to watch, movies. I want to watch all his movies because I adore The Host, and obviously everyone adores Parasite, so I really want to see the rest of his movies, and he mentioned a few that really appealed to me, so I'm going to link that video in the description. If I forget, call me out in the comments and tell me where to point you, but it's a really good video. So I said Pan's Labyrinth. I'm still really annoyed by SOTD. So the two that I narrowed it down to were Saw. I'm sorry, I am a massive Saw fan. We all know this. I do know the later movies are probably not very good. It doesn't matter to me. I love them anyway. But that first Saw movie, nobody can say was not fabulous. That end reveal it still gives me chills. I absolutely adore it. To me, I love nothing more than watching a movie and not having a clue when something happens. It completely catches me off guard. And Saw did that for me. I had no idea where that was going. At the beginning, you think that guy's not dead, that guy's alive. And then as the movie goes on, you lose that focus entirely. And then the end happens and it's like, oh my God. I can still feel the cold chill I got in the movie theatre watching that. And the other one is Martyrs. Absolutely brutal, really clever, really deep, really distressing movie. Spanish movie. It has had a remake. I urge you to watch the original. It's just a brutal movie with a completely different feel and different premise and different idea to it than anything I've seen before. It puts forward a lot of really deep questions, and there's a scene at the end of the movie where one character whispers something in another character's ear, and that will forever just... There's so many different ideas of what do we think that character said. If you've seen the movie, I don't want to say any more in case you haven't, but what did that person say to the other person? I would love to know. But Martyrs is an incredible movie. So just started a real deep love affair with a franchise for me. Again, like with the previous choices, Martyrs is a much better film. I'm going to pick Saw because Saw for me personally just... Maybe I'm a sick puppy, but just like to see people getting tortured. I don't know. In saying that, I didn't really like the Hostel movies. I'm going to go for the 2000s with Saw because it was the start of a franchise that I adore, even though some of the later movies are not very good. I shall go to the cinema and support them anyway. And yes, I did enjoy Spiral, so there you go. Okay, folks, we're nearly there. We're to the 2010s. So that one has a clear standout winner to me. Some other ones I mentioned was A Quiet Place, Train to Busan, I Saw the Devil, Cabin in the Woods, which was such a beautiful surprise to me. I was on a break away to York, a city in England, which is my favourite city in the whole UK. And at the time, I didn't have a YouTube channel. I've always loved movies from when I managed a Blockbuster store many years ago. But I wasn't one to look up what was coming up in the future, that kind of thing. And I went to a little, like, tiny little cinema that night in York, and Cabin in the Woods was on. I'd never heard anything about it, and I came out of it thinking, oh my God, that was just amazing. And the fact that I knew nothing about it in advance, never seen a trailer, never heard anything about it, went in, saw it, blown away by it, I had to mention it. But my choice for the 2000s decade is Hereditary, which is very divisive. I realise I recommended this to my best friend and her partner, and they hated it. It's one of those that some people love, some people find really boring and drawn out. I like a slow burn if it's creepy, if it's going somewhere, if there's a surprise, if it just pulls me in. And this one really did pull me in. The acting performances were outstanding in this. Stuff going on in the background of particular bits of the movie creeps me the hell out. There's a few pieces in it, the imagery just is awful. And it really, like, you're looking at it thinking, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And Hereditary just, I adored. I thought it was fabulous. So that's my choice for the 2010s. Okay, and on to the 2020s. Yes, we don't have much choice at the minute, do we? We're just started into 2022. So we're really just looking at movies over the last 2 years. This is an area where there weren't that many strong choices, I feel. I haven't been a fan of the latest couple of Halloween movies, I have to admit. They were okay, but I certainly wouldn't put them as one of my favourite of the year. Of the 2020s, movies that I really enjoyed, Hashtag Alive, which was, I think on Netflix for ages. It was like a Korean... It's a little zombie movie that I really, really enjoyed. I would thoroughly recommend if you haven't seen it. 1BR, which just had a really novel concept and I really enjoyed. I don't want to go into like what they're about, folks, because I'm sure either you've seen it. If you haven't, write it down and check out if it's something you fancy. So Hashtag Alive, 1BR, Possessor, which was my top movie of the year in 2020. His House, which is a really little hidden gem that I think I watched last year and I really loved. But the top movie for me so far of the 2020s is another very divisive one. It's Titan. I watched this in the last couple of weeks and it's the French one that everyone's talking about. I love this. I watched it and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd because it was so weird. But ever since I watched it, it's been playing on me and I've been thinking about it, and I had to go back and watch it again, and I did, and I raised my score. I just love it because it's completely novel. It's not like anything I've seen before. The female character barely speaks in the entire movie, the lead woman, but I feel you get a complete understanding of her as a character. You know who she is, even though she doesn't speak, and that takes some acting talent. There's a song in it that I've fallen in love with and I haven't stopped listening to since. I do thoroughly recommend you check out Titan. It won't be everyone's cup of tea. As I said in my summing up recently of what I'd watched in the week, don't watch this with your parents, folks, or with your kids if you've got kids. Some people's kids are old enough and they have that really good relationship, like Jen's Reviews from the Grave with Christian, where they could watch this together happily. But oh my god, I would not want to sit down and watch this with my son. No. But it is fabulous. It just pulls no punches. That's all I'll say. Go into it with a very open mind, expecting a very different movie, and hopefully you will enjoy it. So that is my choice from the 2020s, folks. So there you have it, and I hope I haven't spoken for too long. Those are my choices for 100 Years of Horror from the 1920s to the 2020s. I encourage anyone that wants to do the tag. I'm not going to individually tag people, but I would love to hear, as many of you as want to do this. If you obviously do the tag, please credit Horror in Taj, as he is the tag's originator. And yeah, I look forward to seeing any of you telling me your favourites. Let me know in the comments anything that you think about what I've said. Right, so thank you for watching, folks. And it's over and out from Lisa Lives.